Hello all my merry makers, I am Becca and welcome to another Merry Making Monday. And if we have any newcomers, welcome to you as well. Merry Making Mondays are all about me having make-alongs, tutorials, things that I am making so that maybe you'll be inspired or help you in your makes. Usually these makes are knit or crochet based, and today is no different. Basically, I'm starting a second make-along alongside my first one. This is going to be the brioche cable knit hat from Yarnspirations, and today is the first session, so let's get started. So those who may not be familiar, this is the pattern that we are going to be working off of. It is available on Yarnspirations. Here is the project number. I will also be including a link. I'm going to be referring to this a lot, basically just because per Yarnspirations permissions for me to do this tutorial, they said that I must credit them for the source. So today we're going to be talking a lot about what is required in order to even start this hat. So we're going to start with over here where it talks about the yarn that it requires. Now, if you're not familiar with Caron Pantone, it comes in braids, and I have a picture here. Oh, really? Fine then. Of what that may look like. So, I don't think most stores carry this now, like most storefronts like Joann's or Michael's or place like this. When I did my initial search, I did find them on Amazon, and I'm sure that there's other websites that have them. But this is what it means by one braid. And what's interesting to me is that here's the contrasting color it suggests, is that, and I may have mentioned this before, but Caron Pantone color sets like this are considered a bulky weight, and they are a wool acrylic blend. Now, I do not have this specific color, but what I am going to be using is from my own stash of colors is a different set that I have made myself. So this hat consists of 1, 2, 3, and you can't see it, but 4 stripes, and then the 5th color is all the palm on top. So one thing about this pattern I think is really great is if you saw the rainbow hats that I made, you don't have to follow that strictly. This is going to be a great pattern for yarn scraps as long as you can obtain gauge. So like this is considered a bulky 5, but for the rainbow hats I used Red Heart, and as you all know, Red Heart is considered a medium 4. And if you look at them side by side, the Caron Pantone is a little bit thicker, but not by much. So, speaking of gauge, that's one of the things we're going to be doing today. I know a lot of us don't like doing gauge, but I firmly believe that when doing a wearable, you need to do gauge. Now, whenever you do gauge, you have to look at pattern mostly consists of. And I'm going to tell you what the pattern mostly consists of is the brioche stitch. So even though it gives gauge for the twisted rib, we're not going to do that. We're going to do gauge for brioche stitch. And it says that 15 stitches is about 4 inches. And that's the one thing I want to talk about that was kind of inspired by a video that I saw by Jackie at ADHD. She was having a lot of trouble with a pattern because it did not give gauge for the stitch that the pattern consisted of. Make sure you read your patterns. Make sure you know what stitch it consists of. If it does not give gauge for that stitch, you might consider not doing that pattern. So it says brioche stitch on smaller needles, which is going to be our US 8s, 5mm. You need either, now it says double pointed, that's for later when you're doing your decrease. You can do double pointed or circular, and I'm going to get those set up. One thing I really like about this pattern is that it is very detailed. So one of the things it tells you to do before you even start is to take your hanks. Is that what they call it? No, they call it links. So imagine these all twisted up and then, well, not twisted up, but basically folded into another into that braid. So that's why they call them links. But it does suggest that you take each one of your colors and roll and turn them into balls before you even start. I'm not gonna. So there we go. We now have basically a center pull ball. I am going to say that if you buy a lot of hanks of yarn, investing in a Swift and a yarn winder, though it's expensive, I very heavily suggest it. Alright, I don't know if I went over this or not, but the secondary yarn or the main color yarn, since I don't have the mushroom grayish, is just white Red Heart with Love, 100% medium 4 acrylic. I prefer with Love because it is just a tiny bit softer. Alright, so when it comes to brioche knitting, whether you're brioche knitting in the round or brioche knitting flat, you have to have an even number of stitches. So even though it gives the stitches as 15 stitches, we are going to be casting on 32. So there's two ways people do long tail cast-ons. You can either wrap it around and count, or you can take the other end of your yarn and just tie it on. This is short enough that I'm just going to wrap it around my yarn and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 1 to grow on. Basically fold it in on itself, and wherever it ends is where I want to start casting on. And in case you don't know how to do a long tail cast on, you've got the yarn coming through these 3 fingers, around your pointer and around your thumb. Take the yarn down, go up by your thumb, grab the yarn, bring it up. Up through your thumb, grab it, bring it up. I've shown you this before, but in case you've missed it before, I wanted to show you. So like I said, we're going to cast on 32 stitches. I'll see you there. Alright, I have 32 stitches on my needle. And I'm going to be doing something called magic circle with my circular needles. If you're using double points, just separate them evenly between your double points, like you would if you were already starting making the hat. And that's another thing I'm going to say about doing gauge. If your pattern calls for you to work in the round, do your gauge in the round. If the pattern calls for you to work flat, then do your gauge flat. These are things I have learned that I hope will help you save your sanity. Alright, now these are not evenly separated. That's not what matters. And I just got a low battery. Oh well. We'll pick this up. Alright. So, in case you don't know, when you're joining your work in the round, you want the flat edge facing each other. And I forgot my usual disclaimer of I am right-handed, I am a continental knittle. So if you're not either of those, this tutorial might not be for you. Alright, now even though this is just a gauge, I'm going to go ahead and add my marker for my beginning round. Okay? So this first stitch, I am going to knit. And I'm showing you this in case you have never brioched knit, especially if you've never done brioche knitting in the round. Bring the yarn to the front of your work, and then while it's in front of your work, you slip the next stitch, and then you bring it to the back, and you knit the next stitch. And you just continue into that pattern of bringing the yarn front, slipping, and then the next stitch you simply knit. And you continue that all the way around, and that's just setting up your brioche stitch. I'll meet you at the other end where the stitch marker is. So if you've done this correctly, the last 3 stitches should be yarn in front, you slip the stitch, knit the next stitch, and then you slip the last stitch on your needle. And I emphasize if you've done this correctly. Now if you have not done this correctly, I urge you. Oh! Hate it when I hit my camera. I urge you, start over. Try again. It's very important to get this technique down when you've got a small number of stitches on your needles, because you don't want to get to that part of this project when you've got, I think it's 80 stitches on your needles, and discover that you have to start over. Alright, so now we're ready to add our second color. And I had to start over. I moved my stitch marker to after the first stitch. So I slipped the first stitch, and we are actually going to be doing purls instead of knits this time. You want to leave yourself a little bit of a tail here, but when you purl this second stitch, you're purling through both these 2 loops on your needle. And I cast this on a little bit too tight. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is try to keep your cast on a little bit looser. The next stitch, you should have the yarn in front, slip that 1 stitch, bring the yarn around, and purl through those 2 loops. Slip the next stitch that's by itself, purl through the 2 loops, and you're going to do that all the way around. I'll meet you at the other end. Alright, I'm nearing the end of the purl row. I've got 2 more stitches left. I slip this stitch with the yarn in front. Now, it may be hard to see, but there are 2 stitches here. I just have to bring the white yarn back up where it belongs. And then I purl through both yarns. Now that one's going to look a little loosey-goosey for a minute, but don't worry, we'll pull on both my white working yarn and my white tail end, and that will clean it up. And now we're ready to do another knit row, which I will show you how to start again, just because I want to make sure that I cover all my bases with you guys. So, you make sure that your secondary yarn color is right next to your first yarn color, in this case blue and white. So you knit through both the blue and the white at the same time. Then the next stitch, you bring the yarn in front and you slip that stitch. Then you knit through both the white and the blue. Now I usually take this time to tighten up my blue tail, or my contrasting color tail as it were, and then put my yarn in front, slip, knit through both those 2 loops, and you're going to continue that pattern all the way around. I'll meet you there. Alright, so we're on our last few stitches here. Pull the yarn to the front and slip. Then you knit through the 2 stitches, and then your last stitch should be pull the yarn to the front and slip. And now you're ready to do a purl row, which again I'm going to show you guys how to do one more time. This one's not going to be as fiddly, so because you don't have to worry about the tail. But you do have to bring this yarn in front before you slip that first stitch. And then you keep the yarn in front and you purl through both those stitches. Slip the next stitch with the yarn in front, bring it around, and purl. So now you sorry, my phone started ringing and I have no idea who that was calling me. Anyway, this is actually considered row 4 when you're thinking about this pattern, or how this pattern reads. Since this says that 30 rows is about 4 inches, especially if you're not familiar with brioche knitting, I'm going to go ahead and say go ahead and do at least 16, just so you can get a feel for it and so you can get a good gauge. And in case you guys don't know how to measure gauge, I'm going to meet you after I do a couple rows and show you how to measure gauge, and that's where we're going to end today. So in case you've never measured gauge before, I took mine off my needles because my needles were being a pain in the tush. But you want to keep your work on your needles. So when you measure gauge, either with a gauge ruler like this or a measuring tape, you line it up with the first stitch, and then you count how many stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's basically 9 stitches per, well, 8.5 stitches per 2 inches. So let's see, it gave us 15 stitches for 4 inches. So if I say 8.5 times 2, so my gauge is actually a little bit too big. So I can do one of two things. I can keep my needles where they are and just accept that the fact that my hat's going to run a little bit on the small side, or because my gauge is too small, I can bring my needles up a size. Now here's the important thing. If I bring my smaller needles up a size, I want to bring my larger needles up a size. So for example, if I brought this up to 5.5, I would want to bring this up to 6.5. Now say your number, you had too many stitches, then you would have, wait, I may have said that wrong. Hold on. You had not enough stitches, my bad. So let's say you had 13 stitches for 4 inches. You would want to go down, and you might want to think about going down in needle size. Again, if you brought this down to 4.5, you would want to bring this down to 5.5. I actually like a tighter hat, so I'm going to keep my needle size where it's at. I hope this has been very informative to you. Yes, we didn't actually get to the actual pattern for this week, but I felt like there was a lot of information that you needed to know going into this pattern so that you can be fully prepared. So the 31st of July should be when the next video goes up. I hope to see you then. In the meantime, please join me for What You Working On Mondays and any other pop-up videos that might occur. Until then, my merry makers, make what makes you merry. Ciao.